Hey, everyone. It's Dr. Tamara Beckford with Your Caring Docs, where we bring you lots of health, wellness info that you can incorporate into your life and you can take an active role in your health and well-being. We also have a special segment, which I absolutely love, which is Your Caring Docs, Docs Who Cares, right? That's where we bring you doctors from all over the world who will help us with their health and wellness info. They're going to drop all of the gems right here. And the biggest part is that they're going to leave all their info here so you can get in contact with them if you'd like to be part of their patients, or if you'd like to be part of their client list, or if you just want to follow along because they're dropping so many gems, right? That's right. So today, boom, we have a special guest. We're going to go over health and well-being. Woo, super excited. All right, I'm going to drop the little bit of gem on Dr. Rebecca Lauderdale. All right, so here we go. So Dr. Rebecca Lauderdale, she went to med school at the University of Mississippi School of Medicine. Then she did her internal medicine residency at the same area, right? University of Mississippi. Then she is a doctor that she's just so passionate that she decided to kind of narrow in and helping other physicians flourish, right? So she loves to help women physicians find their ways to a flourishing life. She didn't stop there. Because of all of this interest in helping, she decided to put together a podcast, she's the host of Physician Flourishing podcast, which brings evidence-based and science-based practices to help her listeners flourish. With all of these, we're going to bring all of that gem here today. So everyone, let's welcome Dr. Rebecca Lauderdale.
Oh, thank you so much, Tamara. I haven't had such a warm welcome and I can't remember how long. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we are super excited. Now, you have gone into the health and well-being space. You're helping physicians flourish, but there is a reason that this has happened. So tell us the background, the story,
Sure.
How, you ended up in this space.
Yeah, this is something I really love to talk about now. If you had caught me 7 or 8 years ago, I wouldn't have wanted to talk about it at all.
Absolutely. And this is probably something that happens to a lot of people, right?
Absolutely. And everybody that's got a real passion for something, there's always a story behind it. And there's usually some pain too. And overcoming that can make us really good teachers.
Absolutely.
So I, from a very young age, knew that I wanted to be a doctor. Like there was just never a question in my mind. I have a picture of me when I was 6 years old with a little plastic doctor kit. And I, from that age all the way through school, through high school and college, I knew it. I pursued experiences where I could learn about the human body. I could learn about chemistry and biochemistry and how the body works, and just fascinated always. Yes. So I went to medical school with a great deal of enthusiasm. And by the time I got to my 9th year in practice after residency, I was profoundly depressed and burned out and felt trapped. And I like to say now that I like to go back and kind of do a dissection. What's the anatomy of that burnout? What happened? And at the time, there weren't a lot of people talking about burnout. Now there's a fair amount of attention being paid in the world of medicine to the very high burnout rates in physicians and healthcare providers. And we know that some subgroups of us have even higher burnout rates, women and people of color. And there's been enough study now that we know a lot more about what causes it. And I wasn't happy to stop at just being not burned out. I wanted to go beyond that. I wanted to flourish. I wanted to live to my potential. And it took a lot of struggle and, but just a a persistent, just a knowledge, somebody knows how to figure this out. I've got to find the people who know how to figure this out because I'm absolutely miserable.
Right.
And what I found was that a lot of the reason for my burnout was social conditioning, and kind of for social conditioning just for us as women, as just people, as people in medicine, as physicians, things that we're taught are okay and not okay, and that we just sort of swallow and take. We go into medicine, we get into medical school because we follow the rules. Absolutely. And then we get through residency because we follow the rules, no matter what the rules are. And then when we get out, suddenly we don't realize how much power we have. We don't realize how much autonomy we can have, and how much we can say no to, and how much we can dream and create. So I have a couple frameworks that I like to teach people because I think they're so powerful, and they can go with you beyond this conversation, and you can kind of examine them for yourself and see how true they are for you. And they can be like a roadmap. So the first things that I learned were just in the psychology. So the psychology is also relatively new when we're talking about human flourishing. Up until 20, 30 years ago, there was hardly anybody doing any work to figure out, okay, we've spent all this time on pathology, and we haven't necessarily made a whole lot of ground. And a lot of research in psychology was very theoretical and esoteric, and it didn't address the real problems that people have, or help people to flourish, help us to know what is it that leads people to flourish. So a man named Martin Seligman, who is a psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania, decided, after studying learned helplessness, that was his field. And he was he basically he's like, I'm done with this. I want to work on things that I know are going to help people. And he got a lot of pushback, but he built up a body of research and became internationally renowned as the founder of positive psychology. And
it's such a flip, right?
Yeah. I used to hear that term positive psychology and think of it as kind of being synonymous as pop psychology or self-help in general, but it's not. There's real science here. And there are real things to be learned. So there's an acronym called PERMA, PERMA. And from the research, this is psychological research on what helps people to flourish. These are the things that give people the greatest life satisfaction. So P for positive emotion, E for engagement, R for relationships, M for meaning or purpose, and then A for accomplishment or achievement. So briefly, just to go through those. So positive emotion is happiness, feeling happy.
Right.
There are interventions that you can do. There are things you can do to feel happier, but you can only change it a certain amount. Most of your happiness, believe it or not, is inherited. And so you can change 5 to 15% just from, using humor, things like that, incorporating them to get, just kind of happy feelings. I'm not talking about deep reward and fulfillment and joy. Those are different things. So then there's engagement and flow. So those times when you are in an activity and you forget about time. Yes. You're so into it. And we all know like how rewarding and just it feels good. And you might not be like laughing and smiling the whole time. You may be intensely focused, but those are very rewarding activities.
Yeah, one of our colleagues mentioned that when she's doing pottery, she said that knows that, she's thinking, I've only been here for 20 minutes. And then looks up, it's been 2 hours. So that's what you're talking about.
So we find the things that engage us by learning about our strengths. And the psychology department at the University of Pennsylvania has done a bunch of research, and there's a free strength survey online. They use the results for research, but you don't have to put your name in. They do those anonymously, but there's tens, hundreds of thousands of people who have taken this. And it's called VIA strengths. If you just Google VIA strengths, you'll get to that test, and it'll give you a report and some explanation. And basically, I think there are 24 different areas, and it will give you your kind of top 4 or top 5 strengths. And then some things that you can think about to do to improve those strengths. So what they found in the research is that focusing on weaknesses that need to be improved does not lead to well-being the same way that focusing on strengths does. And you would think, well, okay, well, how do you deal with weaknesses then? Because we can't just ignore weaknesses.
Right.
The way that you work on your weaknesses is with your strengths. So you utilize your strengths to help your weaknesses. So if one of my strengths is creativity, and one of my weaknesses is frugality, then my creativity, I'm going to use my creativity to figure out ways to be more responsible with my resources. So rather than just sit and try and, beat myself over the head about the things I'm weak about, we all have weaknesses and we all have strengths. So when we know about our strengths and we use them and we grow them and make them even stronger, we are more satisfied with our lives. So it's important to know those things about yourself.
Absolutely.
And then we get to relationships. So this is the need that we have for love and connection, physical and emotional contact with other people. We don't get away being human beings without good relationships and still have high life satisfaction. It doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen without work. And when we love other people, we feel more lovable. And there's a positive feedback loop there. So then we get to meaning. The M in PERMA is meaning and purpose. And that's just your why. So finding out what your values are. Other people don't give you your purpose. Other people don't give you your meaning. And that's something that tripped me up for a long time was, searching for meaning outside myself when really that meaning has to come from in you. What is most important to you? And that then has even more positive feedback on our level of engagement and flow and our relationships and our happy feelings. And then number 5, the accomplishment or kind of mastery, working toward goals, having hope for the future. We get more and more excited about our goals as we accomplish more. So there's this more, this positive feedback loop that happens.
Absolutely.
So those are the 5 elements of PERMA. And one thing I will say is that, I mentioned that happiness, just positive emotion, is highly heritable, and you can't change it a whole lot with individual interventions. But if you have a lot of engagement, if you have a lot of good relationships and meaning and purpose, the happiness automatically goes up on its own. More so than it does by itself if that's all you're focusing on. So that's really interesting to me. And it bears true in experience.
Oh, absolutely. Wow. So just really incorporating like that PERMA, you can see how you start having a purpose and how you start flourishing and how you start having a lot of fulfillment within your lives. Wow. So you're giving us like that has been based on the studies at the University of Pennsylvania. So
and all over the world. So this work is being done
from there, I should say.
Yeah, it kind of emanated from there.
UPenn. So we see that there is science behind what we are thinking, because it's interesting that you mentioned about working on your strengths. If we really think about how we have been taught from younger age until now, it's usually, well, that you're strong at that. work on these areas that you're not
Yes.
so strong at,
Mhm.
so that you can bring it up to that same level. And
Yeah.
so when now and if we really think about it, working on our weaknesses in that respects and ignoring our strengths, the strength is there for a reason, because that makes you feel
Mhm.
great about doing it, right?
Right. And you could see why you would get, as a child or
Mhm.
as a student, why you would feel discouraged and disengaged if what you're being asked to do all the time is just to work on weaknesses.
Things that you're not really, well, either you're
Yeah.
not good at or you're probably not as interested in, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. And Angela Duckworth wrote a book called Grit several years ago. She is Martin Seligman, the psychologist I talked about, is kind of her mentor. She was one of his graduate students, and she has done a lot of work on education.
Yes.
And these things in education and how important it is to work on strengths with kids. And again, you don't ignore weaknesses, but you teach them to use their strengths in order to address their weaknesses. And there's a whole different level of engagement and enthusiasm that way. And people are just happier.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. So now we've talked about that. Now let's talk about some of the, we're talking about the science of well-being. And I think that that's probably part of what you just mentioned, right? The science of well-being. But there's also another part that you're very interested in, that you help, even though it'll state that you help physicians, but these are techniques that can be used beyond just for physicians, right?
Absolutely. This research that I've talked about so far is this is general population.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now there's a part of this science of well-being that incorporates self-compassion. Now, if we know self-compassion is so challenging, because it's easier for us to be compassionate for others than we are for ourselves.
Absolutely.
So, talk about that, how challenging it is, and why is it so challenging for us to be self-compassionate, but how, when we are, how it helps us in so many ways.
So self-compassion is different than self-esteem. Self-esteem is more, an idea of like, how good am I?
Yeah.
And self-compassion is a befriending of yourself and an accepting of yourself with your weaknesses and your strengths, your mistakes and everything. There's a woman named Kristen Neff who is a PhD. I can't remember if it's psychology or she's social work, but she has studied self-compassion and done a good bit of research on it, and has a book that has come out called Fierce Self-Compassion. This was something that I was very resistant to when I was, especially those first years, all through medical training and those first years of practicing afterward. I thought that the idea of self-compassion was like a cop-out. I thought it was a way that people let themselves off the hook. And that it was weak. And
I love that you're saying that, because so many of us think the same way. And that's why I asked, what is the challenge? Because it's so challenging.
Those thoughts that we have about what that means. Does it mean if I have self-compassion? And so my initial thoughts about that were, it means you're weak. It means you're gonna if you're gonna just let yourself off the hook, you're never gonna get any better at things. You're never gonna, but I mean, already you hear that voice that I was talking to myself with was this harsh inner critic.
Absolutely.
And those we take up. So this is another really interesting thing that I didn't know a lot about until reading really just this year. Now, I've spent a lot of time on inner critic work. I didn't know about the kind of the neurology or the neuroscience of it until recently. There's another psychologist, is actually a neuroscientist named Ethan Kross, Kross. He wrote a book that came out early this year called Chatter.
Mm.
And it is an amazing book for anybody who wants to learn more about their inner critic and their inner voice, just their inner talk and how that affects you.
Mhm.
So this is something that happens to everyone. It is a part of our normal development as toddlers, as infants. We internalize the conversations that go on, especially conversations directed toward us.
Mhm.
And we internalize the things that are told to us, the instructions that we're given in this thing called the phonological loop. And it's that the inner talk and the inner sight. And we replay conversations and things, and then we start to internalize them, and they become part of our inner voice. So it's like it's directly associated with our ability to develop self-control.
Right.
It's how we learn to behave. But none of our parents are perfect, and none of us, you internalize that, and then you take it as you grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And you internalize other things too.
Mm-hmm.
So those things they start to come in, and we don't learn to be really careful about what we let in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can develop these very harsh internal voices that we believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so those can be the reason why if we try to do these things in PERMA, all those things, we can try to do that, but we can hit major roadblocks along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I've found in my experience, a lot of that has to do with this internalized chatter, these
Mm-hmm.
things that I believe that I don't really know I believe,
Right.
until I can step back and separate from it.
Mm-hmm.
So that book has some really great ways, some really great exercises. One of my favorite is to create a persona for one of your inner critic voices, and give it a name and make it funny and just kind of make it silly.
Mm-hmm.
You're not berating yourself for it. You don't make fun of it. You're just like, oh, that's her again.
Right.
She always says that. And you just are like, okay, you're there, but you know what? I can take care of myself. I'm a grown up, and I'm not going to listen to what you're saying right now.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're there to help me. That's what you're for, but I'm good.
Thanks at this point.
Yeah. And that takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
It's a lifelong practice. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Especially to recognize it, right? Because
Absolutely.
it creeps in during time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are ready to make a big decision and you've
Mm-hmm.
thought it through and you feel great about it, you know all your pros and your cons, and then right before you make that decision, the chatter comes in.
Yes.
So but if you start to recognize that chatter, you could say, I think I call
Mm-hmm.
mine chatter, now that you mention it. A friend of mine, we were on the phone, and then we just came up with the name Buford.
Oh, that's awesome. That's exactly the practice that they teach.
Yes.
That's what works, is
Yes.
getting space and understanding that it's not really
You. Exactly.
It's these things you've internalized. It's not really you, and you don't have to listen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you guys go out there. There are a lot of us that have a name for our internal chatter that prevents us from doing great things, because
Mm-hmm.
it's when you are really about to, like we say, step your game up, when you are
Mm-hmm.
about to do something challenging, that chatter is there trying to help to protect you. Oh, no,
Yeah.
don't try to be great. You're fine where you are. But you're like, but I want to do more. The chatter
Mm-hmm.
is, but what if you get, that's when all the negative thoughts, what if you get
Mm-hmm.
embarrassed? What if they laugh? What if they this? And, that story of that kid on the stage so that's what all the chatter starts bringing that. So if you said, Buford, get back. I've already thought about this. I'm going forward.
And sometimes, it can be difficult to tell sometimes, is this, is this me, or is this internal voice? And one of the ways that you can tell is that it will swap. It'll flip back and forth. It'll be like, it will criticize you for example, you get really like pretty and fancy for something, like you dress up and you're looking good, and your inner critic is like, you're so shallow. Like,
Ah,
why do why did you spend all that time? Why did you
right.
spend all this money on those clothes? Why did you do that? And then in the other breath, you listen to that, it criticizes you for the opposite. Oh, well, you look terrible.
Mm,
It's just this back and forth, these things that contradict each other. And then you can be like, oh gosh, this is just
this is Buford
sit
again.
in the back seat. Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful, wonderful. So now we learned how using and incorporating and recognizing with a lot of practice,
Mm-hmm.
the chatter. We'll just call it the chatter because I love that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
In recognizing the chatter, you can move along from being negative towards yourself and having self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Recognizing that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So another thing that we wanted to talk about is, which I think is really, really important, is that shame resilience.
Yes.
Let's talk about shame resilience.
So another thing, I think this is all humans should know what makes humans flourish, and then what is going to get in your way.
Mm.
What can you do about it?
Mm-hmm.
So number one on the list of things that will get in your way is shame. And that inner critic voice is part of that is, shame. So, and we can be distinct about the differences because some of us don't necessarily have the same definitions. So just to be clear about shame in the kind of social psychology definition, guilt is, I know I did something wrong. It goes against my values. It goes against what I would have wanted to do. That's something I need to fix.
Mm-hmm.
Shame is, I'm bad.
Ah.
It's not, I did something bad. It's, this means I'm bad.
So it moves it from the action to the person.
Exactly. And so when we feel shame, all of us may perceive it a little differently, but there's a physical sensation along with it. And if it often happens in social situations because shame, it's really always social situations. Almost it's our relationship to other people and how we think they perceive us. And it's a response that's meant to save us from being shunned by the tribe, keep us safe, keep us part of the tribe. When we feel shame, we tend to shut up. We shut up and we shut down. Some people, though, in some situations will lash out when they feel shame. But we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the fact, I feel shame about this. I feel shame that, one thing I've struggled with is weight. As a physician, how am I supposed to advise people about health if I'm overweight? And that feels, feel shame about it. And, so if I feel shame about it, I'm very unlikely to speak about it. And I'm also likely to be defensive, and I'm likely to be really judgmental about anybody else with the similar problem, and get real excited about other people who seem to have a bigger problem with it than I do. Cause, oh boy, look at them. Yeah. They're way worse than I am.
Absolutely.
So one of the ways to work through shame is just to begin recognizing when it happens, and employ some self-compassion, to start to realize, this happens. People's bodies change. We go through pandemics and some of us gain weight.
Absolutely.
All of us are not perfect. And all bodies are not to look the same. And there are different ways of being healthy, and, beginning just showing compassion. And the other huge thing is to have a support network, to have people that you do speak about it with. That's one huge thing. Just speaking its name starts to dissipate it. It's like Voldemort, you say it and it's like, oh, it's just like, it's not as powerful as I thought, but to me, who was always a very I had a lot of shame built up about things, and I didn't really want to talk about it because I thought if I talked about it, then people would really know how bad things were. But really what happens is people see that as a strength. When you share those weaknesses with people, they can know you. And you don't know, nobody ever knows you if you don't share your deepest parts. And I'm not saying you should share your deepest parts with everybody, but you need some people, somebody, you know. And if you don't, you won't ever feel like you really belong because you haven't given people a chance to know who you are. So, so that's really important to know about shame and the ways that shame shows up in your life, and know what to do about it. Some really great resources on that are, again, Kristen Neff and Brene Brown is the queen. Her work has changed my life. And a lot of what she teaches about is about recognizing and dealing with shame.
Wonderful. Yeah, she's down here in Texas.
Oh yeah, Houston.
Yep, University of Houston.
Yeah.
Where she is right now. Wonderful, wonderful. Wow, you have given us a lot of resources, a lot of information, and a lot for us to reflect on within ourselves and how we really treat ourselves. You know, self-compassion, shame resilience are just two of the topics that we talked about. But I think we even went even deeper than that. The science of well-being.
Yeah.
You know, the evidence-based info that's out there. And then you've given us a lot of books that are there to help us along the way. You know, and all of this would not have happened had you yourself not gone through this traumatic period in your life. And so it really just lends the truth that once you go through something and you've overcome it, or you found ways to do it, how helping others really helps you in addition, right? So, wow. So that's great. So now, with all that we've just talked about, I want to know, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? Okay. So when I want to do something that's not very physically active, it's either reading or knitting. I love to knit. Oh. You can't see the whole corner of my closet full of yarn over here. And then, so another really fun thing that I learned to do last year during, you know, kind of when the pandemic started, at one point, before we had, we had some local rules about masking and about like how large a gathering you could have. And I love to go to music, like live music. And we have a couple of music festivals we love to go to every year, and we knew we were going to miss it. And it's just a really like, it's a good experience. We come back refreshed from it every time. So some friends of mine and I decided to have a silent disco. And we had to limit the number of people who could come, but we rented the headphones and the receiver and everything. And I learned to DJ.
What?
So
DJ Dr. Lauderdale.
DJ Silver Fox.
Woo! I love it. Yes. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to broadcast this because I am pretty sure DJ Silver Fox, we can probably try to find a way if all of those other DJs have.
I have a sequin hat with a fox on it.
Woo! All right. DJ Silver Fox in the house. Let's talk about the whole well-being. That's what we just got. We have the mind, the body, and the spirit all incorporated. I love it. Yes. So when are we going to have our next DJ sessions? Because you have to broadcast some of this.
That's right.
Yes, we can do it. Wow, wonderful, wonderful. This has been like the best answer that I've had so far. We went from knitting to
a knitting DJ.
I love. Thank you so much. But before we even go, let us all know, other than at djsilverfox.com. But
I got to buy that domain.
I guess. Go ahead and buy it before this comes out. But let us know where we can find you on social media for those who would love to listen to the podcast, be part of your community, and so that they can help some of the mind and body, the well-being that you bring towards others.
So I am relatively active on Instagram. I'm Dr. Lauderdale, Dr. and Lauderdale spelled just like the fort. And you can also find me on Facebook, Rebecca Lauderdale. Like I have an MD page that's just a page, and then I have a personal account that's public. I have my podcast is my big thing right now. Women Physicians Flourish. It's on all the major podcast streaming services. So you can find me there. And if you go to RebeccaLauderdaleMD.com/podcast, you'll get to my personal podcast page on my website. And there's a sign up there where you can give me your email address, and I'll send you information about new episodes, and am working on a group coaching program, coming out toward the end of September, early October, working with women physicians on all the things that keep us from flourishing and ways to flourish, and specific ways that women physicians can learn to overcome the barriers that we have sometimes as women in medicine. And so our course is going to focus on all that stuff.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the great thing about it is that we know that you have all of this information, the science, the evidence that shows us how we can overcome some of these barriers to flourish within our lives, right? This is wonderful, wonderful. Alrighty, everyone. I enjoyed this so much. I hope you guys.
Thank you so much.
Oh, this is wonderful. So you can find Dr. Lauderdale. She's one of our Your Caring Docs who cares. So we're going to have her on our website. You can find this where you listen to all your podcasts. So in addition to Dr. Lauderdale's podcast, Women Physicians Flourish, you can also find her on our Your Caring Docs podcast and all of the Spotify, Apple, Google, all the FAS that you listen to. And you can find this episode, we will have it on our Your Caring Docs YouTube page. Yes, and you will find all us and Your Caring Docs info on all the social media handles. That's your Instagram, your Twitter, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, your ticking and your talking, right? So I'm Dr. Tamara Beckford with Your Caring Docs. I had a fantastic time. Thank you, Dr. Lauderdale.
Thank you, Dr. Beckford. This is wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. So we are going to see you guys next time. Thank you for stopping by. Ta-ta.